Beautiful. Bruchim Abayim. Be'ezrat Hashem. Today we're going to be learning the last Mishnah of the first chapter of Masechet Bava Metzia. Mishnah Chet. Says the Mishnah. Again, we're talking about documents that a person finds in the street. And the last couple of days we spoke about which kinds of documents you should not return. And today we're going to talk about mostly documents that you should give back to the people that are involved. So says the Mishnah, Matzah igrot shum. So this is a document that details that the Bet Din has evaluated a property. It's a letter of appraisal that if God forbid somebody borrows money and he doesn't have the money to pay back, so then what they do is the Bet Din will foreclose on the guy's house. But first what they have to do is they have to go ahead and appraise the house to know that it is a fair compensation to the lender. One second, gentlemen. Hold on, please. Right. So you have to know that it is a fair compensation to the lender. So what this guy did is he found a letter of appraisal from the court. The court put this in writing that the house is worth X amount of money, and now the court is foreclosing on the guy's house and giving it to the lender as a payment. So if you find that document, you can give it back to the guy, to the lender, so that it's clear that the Bet Din did this. The assumption is that Bet Din will only put into writing that which they have put into effect. And another case, Igrot Mazon. Let's say the person found a letter from the court detailing that the person accepted upon himself to sustain his wife's daughter, who's not his own wife. Or another explanation, says Rabbi Ovadia Bar Tanura, is that if, let's say, the person passed away and he had a bunch of sons, and he's supposed to pay from his estate for his wife and for his daughters to sustain them, that they should have food, they should have everything that they need, and that should be paid from the estate. Now the heirs, the sons of the deceased man, they don't want to give any money to the wife and to the daughters. They said, listen, we are the heirs. We are the people who are, receiving this estate, and it belongs to us. So the Ketubah details that he will give sustenance from his estate to the wife and to the daughters, but they don't want to do it. So in such a case, the Bet Din in that case goes ahead and sells the property that they got in order to give the sustenance to the wife and to the daughters. They have to be provided for. They can't just be thrown out in the street. So the Bet Din writes down on a document a letter basically detailing that they're going to sell this property in support of the daughters and the wife of the person who passed away. Because you got to remember, we used to be in times of Mishnah, a person could easily have more than one wife, and he's got 10, 11 children from different wives, and he's got a few, he has one wife that the boys inherited all the assets, and the wife that's not their mother, and the sisters that are maybe half sisters, they're not interested in giving or not, maybe even just stepsisters, they're not interested in giving the estate over to them. So the Bet Din says, listen, this is part of the Ketubah of the dad, and we have to make sure that they have their sustenance. So if the Bet Din wrote it in writing, that means they already did it, and if you find it, you give it back. Okay, to the wife or to the daughters. Okay, Shitrei Chalitza Mionin, says the Mishnah. What happens if the court wrote a document, and again, this guy finds this document in the street? So this is a shtar of chalitza. Chalitza is when there's supposed to be what's called levirate marriage, meaning that, God forbid, there are two brothers, one of them is married, one brother dies, meaning the brother that's married died without having any children from his wife. So the halakha says that his other brother is supposed to step in and marry the wife and have children, and the child will be considered the child of the deceased brother. The wife has the right to say, listen, I never liked this brother-in-law of mine. I don't want to get married to him. So she can do what's called chalitza. Vice versa, the brother can also say, I never liked my sister-in-law, I don't want to get married to her. So they can do chalitza. Chalitza is when the lady goes and she takes off the shoe. It's a special kind of a boot that the brother-in-law wears. She removes it, she spits, and then she goes ahead and she says, "Kacha yaseh," right? This is what will be done to the person who doesn't uphold doesn't give a name, doesn't leave a legacy for his brother that passed away. Once they do chalitza, then she can go and marry anybody else. After the chalitza, the court wrote down a document stating that chalitza was done for this woman, and she can go ahead and get married to whoever she wants. And then that can happen. She can go get married. This guy finds that document in the street. Can you go ahead and give it to the woman? And now she has proof that she's a chalitza. What if she didn't do that? The answer is no. You can't give it to her. It's perfectly fine to give it to her because we assume that Beit Din would never put such a document in writing until it actually took place. The same thing with what's called mi'un. A father is allowed to receive money for kiddushin for his daughter until she's 12 and a half years old. Let's say that she's 7 years old and there's a guy that says, you know what, this girl, she's probably going to be a beautiful girl when she grows up. I want her to be engaged to me from now. So he goes to the dad, he gives the father money for kiddushin, and now the daughter is mekudeshet, she's already betrothed legally to the man who gave kiddushin money to the father. Now, God forbid the father passed away, let's say, when the daughter was young, and the daughter was, let's say, 8 years old. So now the rabbis made a rule that if the father is not alive, her mom can receive kiddushin money for her, and her older brothers can receive kiddushin money for her, and she can get engaged that way. But the difference between both ways of getting engaged is that one is kiddushin mideoraita on a Torah level, and one is kiddushin miderabanan on a rabbinic level. What's the difference between the two? The difference between the two is that in order to undo kiddushin mideoraita, in order to get rid of a real engagement on a Torah level, she has to receive a get from the husband if she wants to marry somebody else. However, if she only got the kiddushin on a rabbinic level, let's say she was 8 years old and her mom accepted kiddushin for her, or her brother accepted kiddushin for her, so then she's only engaged rabbinically. So if, let's say, she decides, I appreciate the fact that you wanted me to get engaged, but I don't want to marry this man. I'm not interested in marrying this man. So in such a case, she does not need a get, like if her father had received money for her, but rather all she needs is to do what's called mi'un. Mi'un means that she proclaims that she is not interested in marrying this man, and then she doesn't have to marry. The court will document the fact that she proclaimed that she is not interested in marrying him, and then they will write a document that says that this is what she did, and they will give it to her. Now, for some reason, you're walking in the street and you find the document that says that this girl did mi'un and doesn't want to marry that guy. So can you give it back to her? The answer is yes, you can give it back to her. Why? Because we assume that, again, Beit Din wouldn't have put it in writing if it hadn't happened. Okay. And next, one more thing says the Mishnah. We have still a way to go, but says the Mishnah, Veshitrei berurin, when there's a court case, there's a concept in halakha like this. You know that a certain rabbi is honest. You know that a certain rabbi is fair. He's always been a very good person. And you have a court case with some guy that you think owes you money, and you're subpoenaing him, you're taking him to court. So you decide that you want one rabbi in particular to be there judging the case. You've heard good things about him. you know that he's a famous Talmid Chacham, whatever the story may be. You want him to be a judge. So says the halacha, Ze borer lo echad. You can take one rabbi for yourself. And in the same way that you can assign one rabbi to the case, the other party can assign a rabbi to the case that he sees fine. So he will then go and take one rabbi that he thinks is good to be a judge. And then the two rabbis that were selected will then choose a third rabbi to be the deciding factor between the two opinions. So that's called Ze borer lo echad v'ze borer lo echad. This one takes one rabbi as a judge, that one takes another judge, and then the two judges select a third judge that they both agree upon. And then they judge the case. So says the halacha, Shitrei Berurin, what happens is when you find a document that details who was selected to be the judges on this case, and it lists their names, so then you can give it back to both parties. You can give it back to the Beddin because it's clear that they wouldn't have written it down unless that really was who was selected to be the judges on the case. So in all of these cases, says the Mishnah, Harei ze yachzir, you have to give back the document. So these are documents you can give back. Now, says the Mishnah, Matzah b'chafisa. Let's say that a person finds documents of debt. Okay, he finds that there are documents here that says that Reuven owes Shimon $1,000 and Levi owes Shimon a few $1,000. There are different documents inside of a leather pouch, a leather kind of like a container, some kind of leather holder. So says the Mishnah, O badluskema, or for example, if let's say that it's a much bigger leather, maybe box or something like that. So says the Mishnah, now it's a different ballgame. The fact that now the documents are contained in a vessel is a whole different world. If you remember, we spoke a couple of days ago about the idea that when you find a document, you can't give it back, meaning a document of a loan. You can't give it back to the lender or to the borrower because of the fact that maybe the borrower did not pay and giving it to him would make him not have to pay because now he says, look, I have proof that I paid. Why would I have the document if not? Or vice versa. You give it to the lender and the lender is going to say now, well, the guy never paid me. It could be that he did pay. So we said the halakha is you can't give it back to anybody. But in this case, it's different. Why? Because now it's not just a plain piece of paper in the street, but it's inside of a kli. Inside of a vessel. Why is this so important? Because one of the things that we're going to learn, Be'ezrat Hashem, in the next chapter, is that when you have a siman, when you have a sign, some kind of identifiable feature, something that you can use in order to ask somebody who claims that it belongs to him, you ask him, can you tell me something about what I found? So he could tell you, well, there's a hole in it. Oh, that's a good proof that you know that it's yours, because who else would know there's a hole in it? Or in this case, it's in a leather box. It's in a leather pouch. He knows what it was in. In such a case, the halakha says that you can give it back, because now it's not just a piece of paper with no identifiable feature to whom it belonged, but it's actually in a container that is identifiable. So says the Mishnah, Matzah b'chafisa ubadluskema tachrich shel shtarot. So now over here, not only is it inside one of these kelim, but the Mishnah says that it's rolled up into a roll. So let's say there are like 5 different documents there, and they're rolled up into a roll all together. So the guy is able to come and say, listen, I am the lender, and all of these documents are rolled up together inside of a leather pouch. Beautiful. You can give it back to the guy. Or if it's not rolled up, but let's just say it's piled up inside of the leather suitcase, for example. Okay, there's a bunch of documents piled up together with a rubber band around them in a leather suitcase. So then that's another siman that it belongs to him. So in such a case, agudah shel shtarot, says the Mishnah, It's a pile of documents, right, that are tied together. Says the Mishnah, if that's the case, harei ze yachzir, you can give it back to the guy because you have a siman, you have a proof that it belongs to him. Okay. So now the question is, we mentioned that there's a concept of a bundle. It's in a bundle of documents. It's rolled together or it's in a pile, right? Bundled together. Says the Gemara, what is considered to be a bundle? That's an identifiable feature. Says the Mishnah, the kama aguda shel shtarot, how much is the aguda, the bundle of documents? Says the Mishnah, at least shlosha kshurim ze bazeh. If you have 3 documents that are tied one to another, so then that's a good siman, and then the person will be able to tell you that it's 3, and therefore you can give it back to them. That's a good siman at that point, because how else would he have known that it's the number 3? Okay, says the Mishnah. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, sometimes if you're able to see certain things in the contents of the documents, then you can know that it belongs to one person. For example, he says, Echad halove mishlosha. Let's say that you find that one person, okay, in all of these documents, borrowed. In document number 1, it says Reuven borrowed. In document number 2, Reuven borrowed. In document number 3, it says Reuven borrowed. So in all of these cases, we see Reuven borrowing. So you know what it must be? It must be that at one point, Reuven took out 3 loans from different people. He wrote a document to them saying, I borrowed $50, I borrowed $100, I borrowed $200, and then he paid them back. And when he paid them back, each one gave back the documents. So what he did was he took them, and he was walking around with them, and before he got home, they fell out into the street. So in such a case, yachzir laloveh, you can give it back to the borrower. Why? Because since it's a stash together of documents all saying that Reuven, the same person, borrowed, must be he paid them all back, and he got in return the documents. Okay, says the Mishnah, and the same thing vice versa. What happens if you have shlosha halovin me'echad? You have 3 different people that borrowed from one guy. So in this case, it says that Reuven lent $100. Reuven lent money $100. Reuven lent another person $200. And they're all bundled up in the same group of papers. So in such a case, the halakha says, give it back to the lender. Give it back to Reuven, because clearly what he did was he took a bunch of different documents he had where he lent money to people, and he grouped them together and they fell out. And that's why you give it back to him, because it seems clear that he simply lost his documents that prove that he lent money. Says the Mishnah, Matzah shtar ben shtarotav. Let's say that this person had a bunch of documents that said that people owe him, that people owe someone money. Let's say, for example, he's got a whole lot of documents in his filing cabinet. He opens up his filing cabinet, and in the filing cabinet, he sees a document that's got nothing to do with him. It says in that document, Reuven borrowed from Shimon $5,000. And he has no idea what the reason that this document in his filing cabinet is. What is it doing there? He's not Reuven, he's not Shimon. It's just by him. He doesn't know, says the Mishnah, ve'eino yodea ma tivo. He doesn't know whether or not the borrower paid the money and got the document back and now gave it to him for some reason to keep as proof. He doesn't know whether the lender received this document because he's owed money and he never got the money back either, and now he gave it to this third party as proof. He doesn't know, maybe the borrower paid some of it but didn't pay the whole thing. He's got no idea what the status of this document is. Says the Mishnah, in such a case, Yeheh munach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. Let it sit there until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, eventually before Mashiach, Zeh Hashem today, and they will let him know that what the status of this document is. Now, on the other hand, says the Mishnah, what happens im yesh imahem simfonot? let's say that you have a bunch of documents and they're all about money that's owed to you. On one of them, there's a receipt. There's a receipt which says that this document, which so-and-so owes me $5,000, was paid. So now the question is, well, if there was a receipt, how come I didn't give it to the guy who borrowed the money from me? If there's a receipt over here, I should have given it to that guy. Why is it over here? Maybe I didn't get the money. That's why I didn't give it to him. Says the Mishnah, no. Do whatever it says in the receipt. If it says in the receipt that it was paid, then treat it like it was paid. The reason is because we assume that what happened was the guy paid the money, and then he approached the person for the receipt. The lender didn't write the receipt yet. He said, come back tomorrow, I'll give it to you. He wrote it. The guy never came back. He forgot to come back. But really, he paid the money. So therefore, we have to assume that the debt was paid because there is a receipt there, and therefore he should tear up the document and treat it as if it was paid. All right, gentlemen, that is today's Mishnah. It was a very detailed and complicated Mishnah, Baruch Hashem, but a lot of things that we learned over here. So, Chazakim u'Bruchim, and if we have any questions,
Rabbi, if they do chalisa, so if the woman doesn't want to marry the brother-in-law, or the brother-in-law doesn't want to marry the sister-in-law, both scenario, the lady, she has to take off the shoes from the brother?
yes,
or
yes, the lady has to take off. Yes,
the lady has to take off. Yes, and speed. Just the lady, she's speed.
yes, yes, exactly. All right, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Chazakim u'Bruchim.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Wonderful day.